All right, guys, I got a brand new phone and I got a fancy new phone holder. We'll see if these videos get any better. Today, we are going to go over the anatomy of a paint gun, your basic paint gun. And then I'm going to show you how to set one up. We'll go in the paint booth. I have several different style paint guns out here, or brands of paint guns, and they will all work. This one we use here at school all the time. If you saw the Jeep video, this is the one that we used to paint everything on the Jeep. When Chase painted his Mustang, this is the gun he used to put the sealer on. It's a DeVilbiss Techna. I think it's a 1.3 needle in it. We'll go over that. It's a great gun. I know it's dirty, but it's not what's on the outside that's important. But we can clean that all up, but not worried about that. That's not what we're here to talk about today. This is like an economy gun. It's made by the ATD tool company. You can get a 3-pack. You'll get, this is like the cheaper version of this gun. You get this one, you get a primer gun. We'll talk about that later. And you get a little mini one of these with that. This is this is our base gun we use here at school. This is a very expensive gun. It's relatively new. This is the gun that Chase used to put the color, the base coat, on the Cobra. And this here is another expensive gun. The difference between this really expensive gun, this cheap gun, and this middle of the road, well, this is actually an expensive gun too. These two guns here, and you can throw this gun into the mix, they are professional grade guns. What I mean by that, they can handle getting used every day, taken apart and getting cleaned thoroughly multiple times a day. Even though that looks dirty and you're like, it doesn't look like it's been taken apart, it has. I mean, you can see it's even got the wrong screw in here, just because when you got over 100 students touching this thing, stuff happens, but it's a great gun. When you take one of these cheaper style guns, it's great for using at home. I have a couple of these at home myself. They're fine, but they can't handle that. Like if you notice the finish, they made it look like it was anodized, and you can see it's just coming right off. They can't handle it. They spray good. They don't hold up. The seals aren't good, but you can buy, literally you can buy 10 to 20 of these. It probably that much, probably more than that, versus one of those or one of those. So, you know, you kind of get what you pay for in a sense. Since all of these guns are basically set up exactly the same, I am going to use this one as the example, and I'm going to disassemble it. Okay, we're going to start with, this is the air cap. It just unscrews, all those guns are the same. Followed by, this is the fluid needle. Now this is very important. If this little surface here gets damaged, you've got a problem. I mean, even if it gets damaged on the outside, because there's just barely enough room for that to fit over that, you see? So that's got to be, you got to be really careful with this. This is a gun wrench. It'll come when you buy even a cheap gun, it'll come with it. It has everything on it that you need to take this gun apart.
I keep referring to it as the fluid needle. It is the fluid tip.
You got to be very careful with this fluid needle. It is extremely sensitive. Okay, there's the fluid needle taken out of there. This gun's due for a real good cleaning, but it's still spraying relatively good. And the air cap. Now, you'll notice there's little teeny holes, and maybe you can see them. It's easier to see them that way. They, you can see the light shining through them a little bit. The holes that are surrounding the outside, they cause the paint to atomize. And these bigger holes, and it's hard to get it to see, that are there and over there, that air is coming out of what's called the air horns. And this is where your pattern comes from. Air is the only thing that comes out of these holes right here is air. Okay, now after we've taken that fluid tip off, This is the fluid needle. We're going to take it off. Now, this is the fluid control knob. We'll talk about this again when I show you how to set the gun up to spray with. So basically, this unscrews. There's a spring in there. The other guns, these are all set up basically the same way, just slightly different style, but they all will come apart the same way. Okay, there's a spring in there. All this spring is doing is keeping tension on that trigger, so that needle goes back into place. You set that aside. Then we'll be able to reach in there, pull the trigger to get that to come out. We'll be able to pull the needle out. Now that's the needle. Like I said, that's not as dirty as it looks like it is. Well, maybe it is that dirty. Anyway, it still sprays good. It needs cleaning, but it sprays fine. This is the fluid tip, the fluid needle. This goes in the fluid tip that I took out earlier, and what happens is that's plugging that hole up. Can you see? I don't know if you can see that or not, but that is plugging in. It has to fit perfectly in there. It's machined together, it shuts it off. All the paint, it comes and is going in to this right here. And when this needle comes back, it lets it out. So that's what that does. So they have to be machined perfectly together. And there's different sizes. This one here is a 1-3, I do believe. And they go on up, different sizes for different materials that you're spraying. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the regulator. Now this particular gun and the older ones didn't have a built-in regulator. On this gun, this is the regulator. You adjust it, and it regulates the air. Should have made that clear for you beginners. The air hose hooks onto this, and you adjust the amount of air that's going through the gun and basically out the tip. This is an HVLP gun, which means high volume, low pressure. That's not important for today's lesson, but this gun doesn't have a built-in regulator. I'll give you an example of one with a built-in regulator. This gun here has a built-in regulator, and you'll see I also have a regular one because I don't really care for these. They're great at home because you don't, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't need to know how many pounds of air pressure you got coming out, to be honest with you. But here's how this would work. This, instead of this regulator, you would control the air by this knob right here. If I turn it all the way in, that shuts the air off. The more I turn it out, the more air it's going to let go through. So I do know what PSI are supposed to be sprayed with which material, so I use a gauge. In order to use a gauge with this type, you just open this regulator all the way up so it's not restricting any air. Does that make sense? So basically, it's straight through air now. Then I can just use this regulator to adjust the airflow. And this one's basically doing nothing. Except for this black DeVilbiss, all the other guns, and this one's got your fancy dancy digital. That doesn't regulate anything. That's just the air pressure gauge. You turn this knob down here, and that's what regulates the air. This Iwata here, very nice gun, same way. I use the gauge. I know where I spray with this thing. This one sprays really good, around 29 pounds. And we spray clear. That's the only thing we spray with this gun is clear. This is the built-in regulator, and it's opened all the way up. That's how we set that up. This knob here, the only one that's left, on this particular gun controls the pattern. There's really no need for me to take this out. You don't really take it out unless you're doing a once a year big cleaning on the gun. There's just a couple valves in there. There's no need to take it out. This controls how big the fan is, and I'll go over that with how to set the paint gun up for spraying. On this particular gun, this is the fan control knob. It does the same thing that the top knob does on the other one. Here's the Iwata. This is the fan control knob. This gun here is kind of modeled more after what's called a Masada Jet. It's a German-made gun, very nice gun. This isn't a Masada Jet. This is like a clone of a Masada Jet. Theirs is set up like this, but this knob controls the same thing, and all it is a valve. And what this valve does, let me switch back to the gun that we're using. What this valve does, it controls how much air is coming out of these frame horns, these air horns. And I'll explain that to you later. So that's what that does. This knob right here controls how much air, and it's important to know, is coming out of here. Okay, just about got this wrapped up. Now this is the trigger. There's no need for me to take this off. It pulls the needle back. If you see that little burr right there, inside the trigger there, it'll catch on that, and it'll pull that trigger back as I go. And then the other valve that's in there that you see moving, that's the airflow. We will discuss this being a two-stage trigger when we get into paint booth, when I show you how to set it up. Okay, I have some, it's really dark charcoal gray solvent base coat mixed up in here. Nothing fancy. It's some leftover paint from one of our other jobs. Nothing goes to waste around here. A little disclaimer for people that might be watching this video other than my students. This is an HVLP gun, and technically I'm supposed to be using these high volume, low pressure air couplers on here. The reason why we don't, what this is that air nipple right down there. See the size of the hole in that versus that one? It does make a slight difference, but we don't, because we're not always in the same place, and I would have to outfit so many hoses in here. These are very expensive. If we're doing a special paint job, I can easily put it on in the paint booth, but it's not that big of a deal at the high school setting. So here we go. Okay. Now, if we were spraying clear or single stage paint in here, this gun likes to spray at around 29 pounds. Now, I don't know if you can see that regulator. It's jumped way up. I pulled the trigger and it goes down right now. That's probably, get my glasses down here. That was about 25 pounds right there. Now, I'm going to show you what's going to happen. Matter of fact, I'll bump it up to 30 and I'll show you what's going to happen. Now, do you notice that there's heavy spots here and here? You're like, oh man, Mr. Jones, that gun's all messed up. Well, it could be, but I have a feeling it's because I'm spraying base coat, which is a whole lot thinner. What we're going over here is how to set this paint gun up. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to knock that air pressure down to about 18 pounds. Let's try it. Same thing. That's the only thing I've touched. Oh, look, we're getting better. I'll explain what's happening here in just a minute. We'll go down a little bit more. There we go. That's pretty good. Now, what's happening here is this base coat is thin material. Now, I could have done another thing. I could have left the air pressure up a little bit higher and mixed up the base coat a little bit thicker, but I mixed it according to the manufacturer's specifications. So now we have to make the gun work with what the paint manufacturers recommended for the reduction of their paint. So that's what we've got. Okay. Now we've determined there's a million ways to set up a paint gun. Okay. We're going to determine what it is we're painting. In this case, we're going to be painting the hood. We're going to pretend like this is the hood. We've got our pattern set all the way up. Now the pattern, in this case, we're painting the hood, so we want the pattern to be big, like we have it right there. The next adjustment we're going to do in this case is the material, which is the fluid control knob, which, remember, this knob right here is controlling how much that needle comes back. Now, in this case, I had it opened all the way up. But if I crank it in, you know, I had that trigger pulled all the way. You see how much shorter that pattern is than that one? It's because there's not as much material coming out of the paint gun. So that's what that controls. Like, I can turn this all the way in, almost all the way in, and it's barely coming out. For maximum coverage, I'm going to open that fan all the way up. Now, there's times that you'll turn it in depending on metallic, but we're going to keep this basic. So I've got this opened all the way up. We got a pretty good pattern. Now, at this point is where air pressure comes in. We've already set the air pressure. There's basically only two adjustments that we're going to have any control over, and that's the pattern and the amount of material that's coming out. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, we're going to go to this pattern now. I haven't touched the pattern. I had it opened up as big as it would go. Now, let's say I'm not painting a hood. I'm going to paint a bicycle. And it's something realistic you guys may want to do at home. If I turn this thing in, I've not adjusted anything else. The fluid's all the way out. Remember, I've got that turned all the way out. The air pressure's still set at the same that it was for that. Now, if I turn this down, watch what happens. Look, he's going to start running here in just a second. I don't know if you can tell from that far away, but that's getting ready to run. So, if I turn that in like that, now I have to cut the amount of material back. So I'm going to turn this all the way back in till it bottoms out. That won't even let any paint out. Now, it's still too much. Everything else is the same, just a pattern. Now, if you notice, I got if you saw that paper fluttering, air pressure I never adjusted. But remember the air horns that I talked about? There's no air coming out of them now. So all the air is coming out of the center. It's too much air. So now I'm going to cut it back. Now you can hear it. That's basically, so setting up a paint gun. Let's say I handed you this paint gun right now, or you handed it to me, and I'm going to paint a hood. Well, I'm going to go up here to the paper, and again, you say, well, how far away are you from the panel that you're painting? Different people have different techniques. Some people are closer than others. Some people are closer and move faster. But for this video, we're going to say we're about 8 inches away. That's probably about 8 inches. So you're going to hand me this paint gun, and I'm going to come up to my panel. I'm going to plan on painting a hood. I'm going to check my gun out. Well, obviously that's too small. So we're going to open my pattern all the way up. I still remember everything's shut down so I could demonstrate that. Now I've opened the pattern all the way up. Now I don't have enough material, see? And it's barely even anything coming out. So now I'm going to open my material all the way up. Oh yeah. Now see it spitting? That's because we don't have enough air pressure coming out to atomize the paint. So now we're going to bump it back up to about 12 pounds. Let's see what we got. That's pretty much what we want. Now guys, this was very basic, but everything I just showed you will work on any of those guns that I laid out on the table earlier. You're going to set the pattern depending on what you're getting ready to paint. If you're going to paint your bicycle, you're going to turn that pattern in a little bit. And when you turn the pattern in, it's condensing all of that material to come out in one spot, which you saw it gave us a run. So what we're going to do then is we're going to turn that knob in till we get the right amount of material coming out. Then we're going to have way too much air because none of the air is going to be coming out of these horns. So we're going to reduce that down, the amount of air pressure coming out, until we got control over it. And it's pretty much that easy. If you got any questions, leave them in the comment section. Thanks guys, have a great day.